What is going on, you beautiful people of the world? I'm not here today to talk about anything important, anything big. I'm just here to talk. The main thing being how stupid I am. This is a continuing trend, and it's a worrying trend, and I concern myself. Mr. Wizard was actually almost looking out for me. It's kind of amusing timing. So my not sleeping actually gave me a bit of a gift, because I think everybody kind of has that thing that they fall on, where like if they're not focused on something, if their mind isn't occupied on any one important thing, then there's something they're just kind of, it's almost like a nervous tick they're just gonna fall back on. For me, that's checking my email. I have no reason to check it. I'm not waiting on anything important. I'm not like expecting anything, but for some reason, when I don't have something that I'm just 100% completely focused on, my mind is like, every 5 minutes, check your email. Don't know why, but it's just something that I do. And so this happens a lot more often when I can't sleep and it's night. It's like after midnight, but before 5 a.m. where like places actually start opening up, like before I can go to the gym or stuff like that. I do that a lot. And so during one of these times, I actually wound up checking my just for some reason I just read through my email that I got for my registration for Evo. And as I'm looking at it, I notice it doesn't actually list anywhere on here what games I signed up for. And I was kind of confused. So I was like, I guess I should go check the actual website, the tournament on smash.gg, and see what's going on there, see what games I'm signed up for. Because I wanted to just be at that point, I wanted to double check and be sure that I had registered for the tournaments that I wanted to register for. So I go and I check and I look at my event information, and it's like, here are the tournaments that you are a part of, and the section was just blank. I was like, that's weird. Okay, well there's a button up here that I can press. It's like update registration or something like that. Let me click on that and see what happens. And so I do that, and it brings up like all the options that you can pick. And I had selected all the appropriate things that would allow me to go to the tournament, but for whatever reason, none of the games were selected. I don't know why. I think I remember not filling out the form correctly the first time, and so I either had some piece of information I was missing that I didn't enter, or I didn't enter it correctly, or I hadn't clicked some necessary box, and so it made me redo the registration. And I guess it's when it made me do that, it also deselected all the games that I had thought I had signed up for, and I didn't double check that. So thank God for me not sleeping. And Mr. Wizard actually tweeted about this like an hour ago. It's somewhat amusing timings. I've been thinking about doing this Nate Talks for a little bit. Like, please double check your registration. Make sure you're signed up for the games that you were signed up for. Good thing that I had actually looked at that email, because I would have seen that tweet and been like, what a bunch of idiots, not registering properly. Pfft. Imagine that. Could you actually imagine me showing up at Evo thinking like, oh boy, I'm gonna go play Unist? Where am I on the bracket? Why can't I find myself on the bracket? Okay, what about Samurai Showdown? Why am I not on the bracket here either? Okay, I'm not expecting to actually play this game. I just signed up for this to be a pop monster, but where am I in Tekken? I'm not in Tekken either? What the hell's going on? And so I would have just shown up at Evo and not been playing any games. And could you imagine, on top of that, I'm still waiting. I still don't know if I am going to be fortunate enough to be on the commentary team. But could you imagine if I don't get that either, and I hadn't double checked this? So I just showed up at Evo, and I'm just like, I have literally nothing to do. That would have sucked. So that's why I'm an idiot. So let's talk. I actually saw this interview about Granblue Fantasy Versus. I'll link the interview. There's nothing particularly special about it. My favorite part of this is it's definitely a translated interview. It has to be, just based on some of the language, and like some of it just kind of doesn't really make sense. But so my favorite part is just the second question. The first question they asked was, why did you decide to work with Arc System Works on a 2D fighting game? And so the second question they asked was, is there a specific Arc System game that you've played that inspired you to create this fighting game? And so the answer is, there wasn't really one specific title, but apparently we had played Guilty Gear. Like, they're not sure about it. Like, we were told we played Guilty Gear, but I'm not actually sure if that's the case. We've played a lot of games. I'm sure Guilty Gear was in there somewhere. Just the wording on that answer, it got me chuckling a little bit. But so let me actually go down here. So I tried to check out Granblue Fantasy, and I found out that there isn't an English release of the. I shouldn't say that. There isn't an official English release of the game, but you can play it like in your browser in English. But it's kind of confusing. I tried to play it for a little bit, and then for some reason it randomly just switched back to displaying everything in Japanese instead. And so at that point, obviously, I was like, okay, I don't know what's going on anymore. I'm just going to dip out of this. But yeah, I looked for it on the actual Google Play Store, and I couldn't find it anywhere. And so I was like, huh, that's weird. So it's kind of strange that they have this IP that is somewhat known, but like, wouldn't you want to launch the actual game that drove this to get people hooked into it, and then you release the fighting game? Because there are far more mobile RPG fans than there are fighting game fans, especially anime fighting game fans. So it feels kind of weird, because they actually asked this as well: what are the chances for an English App Store release of Granblue Fantasy? And they say like Granblue Fantasy Versus will build up the reputation of the IP, will be in the second season. Oh, they have an anime as well, so there's a second season of that. And the animation in Granblue Fantasy Versus will contribute to building up the reputation of the IP overseas. Aligned with that, the chance to have an official release of Granblue Fantasy in the App Store, we will see what happens with the other two first. Like, my guy, you're going to have way more success with the mobile game than you will have with either of these two. I can promise you that. Like, fighting games aren't big enough to carry a brand and, like, you know, get an entire massive fan base latched onto that game. It just isn't. And so, questionable decision making there, but they do them. Let's see. So there's a bunch of other just typical questions. They have DLC planned. They have a season pass probably planned. They're saying we are considering about season passes as well. Of course, it's a game in 2019. It's irritating. I haven't been buying into DLC for a very long time, especially from fighting games. I doubt that'll change here, but such is life. Like, I would honestly, I wonder if I would have played. I probably wouldn't have. But I was just thinking, like, I may have actually jumped back into Tekken if I could have played Geese without having to pay for him. I very well may have. Because Geese looks sick. But he's a DLC character, and I wasn't into the game enough to pay more money to potentially not be in the game again. So, whatever. Well, here's the other thing. Was it a challenge trying to balance the game for high-level players and more casual Granblue Fantasy fans? The first thing we wanted the game to be was very understandable for the people that are seeing the game, what is happening in the game. When a game gets too complicated, a limited number of people spectating to understand what is happening. We just wanted to make everybody spectating understand what's going on. This means having a not-so-fast game speed and short combos instead of massive combos that take half or even more of the bars. We did not implement those two aspects into the game. This is for the sake of having it be very understandable for people to watch. I disagree inherently with the idea that that's better for spectating, for something to be slower and less flashy. There is a very distinct balance you need to strike between all the things that are going on. For instance, I would never, ever try to suggest to somebody that has never played Guilty Gear to go watch Guilty Gear. The producer is correct that they have so many mechanics in the game, and that can make it difficult to follow from a new player perspective. They have a lot of shit going on. There's a lot of different colors flashing across the screen. The screen is freezing, and you're not necessarily understanding why. You have so many different things going on, and the game's pace is incredibly fast. But I don't think the speed of the game is the reason why that game is difficult to watch. Tekken is also an incredibly fast-paced game. It's also a game that has those combos that he's talking about. I think that is one of the single best spectator experiences that's in fighting games right now. Because even if you just have the barest, slightest understanding of even just fighting games, you can understand what's happening on your screen, what's going on. You can tell because of the way they make it. When you get a counter hit, the screen shows it. It's devastating when you get a counter hit because of the impact the game has implemented behind it. And you can see what has occurred because of that. When somebody does a whiff punish because of their movement, you can tell why. Like, you can understand everything that's going on despite Tekken 7 having a pretty damn fast pace and having those combos. This is just another example again of people that think simplification and that fighting games are too hard for the average person, and that simplification means dumb it down for dumb people. And that's not necessary. That's not the case. You don't need to do that. You're trying to tap in to an audience that doesn't give a fuck about you. There are so few people in the world that have looked at a fighting game and been like, no, it's too fast, I can't tell what's going on. There are tons of people, for instance, I do firmly believe, and it's why I try to avoid saying it, about that Guilty Gear is too hard. It's the hardest fighting game out there. It's too difficult to play. That's bullshit. It's complete and utter bullshit, but it is perpetuated nonstop, continually by a lot of people that have never even played the game, but they're just parroting it from people who say that and may not be very good at fighting games to begin with. This isn't necessarily about Guilty Gear, but the first thing that comes to mind is that rather infamous clip of James Chen playing Tekken 7, getting bodied and just raging out of his damn mind and just saying, this is so hard, it's so hard, this game is so hard. It's not. It does require, if you want to get to a certain level, it does require a dedication to learning mechanics that are very specific to Tekken that won't help you anywhere else, such as the movement in the game and stuff like that. Like, it's not really going to help you anywhere else to master that mechanic, but it's going to be huge in ensuring that you can be competitive in Tekken. There is that aspect of it, but the games themselves, they're not inherently incredibly difficult, and this perpetuation of fighting games are so difficult, so hard, they have this impossible barrier of entry, we need to dumb the games down in order to get more people into it. You're trying to tap into the wrong audience. That audience is not there to begin with. And so it irritates me to continually see this time and time and time again of, oh yeah, we're making this game simple just because we think fighting games are too hard. When has that ever worked for anybody? A fighting game has never flourished because somebody made it simple. It has not happened yet, and it won't happen. I thought Dragon Ball FighterZ had it. I really did. I actually talked about, was it in the last Nate Talks or 2 Nate Talks ago? But I talked about EVO, and how last EVO, I thought Dragon Ball FighterZ had a huge future ahead of it. It barely just passed 1,000 entrants this year. It had, didn't it have over 3,000 last year? Or it was approaching 3,000. It had the most entrants overall. And now it's 7th, I think, in place. I think BlazBlue Cross Tag Battle is the only game that Dragon Ball FighterZ has more entrants than, which is not a good look. And part of that, I really do believe, is because the game's longevity is impacted by the limitations forced on you by the game mechanics themselves. That's just not there for people to want to continue playing, because you hit a ceiling very quickly in that game, and you can't do anything to surpass it. I actually saw a video from Eris recently where he talked about how in Tekken there is no ceiling. There are no mechanics in the game that forcefully limit your potential, and so the people that are dominant in the game look so incredibly dominant because they're just on a different level. And if you want to beat them, you have to get there yourself. You have to put in the time, you have to put in the grind to get to that level yourself. There's nothing else you can do. There are no mechanics in the game limiting how good you are. And so when somebody has put in more time, has gotten incredibly good, it shows because they are dominant. That's never really shown in Dragon Ball FighterZ. You do have the top tier players. You have maybe a small group of 10 to 15 players overall that you'll always see in the top 8 every single time. But their placements in that top 8 fluctuate wildly, because even though some of them may be better fighting game players overall, they're limited by Dragon Ball FighterZ. They're limited by the game itself into how how they can play it, how they can express their skill in what they can do. And that's always going to be the case if you try to simplify fighting games for the sake of simplification, and people are just going to abandon your game. And that's not good for you. You don't want that to happen, but that is what is going to continually happen as long as these people behind the development of fighting games have this ridiculous idea in their head that fighting games should be simplified for the average person. The average person will never stick around in fighting games. Because you can't dumb it down enough to the point where they will feel happy about playing a fighting game early and getting bodied by all the people that are already fighting game fans. You honestly have to be a special kind of person to accept those beatings, to not be discouraged by them, and to keep grinding, keep moving forward with the understanding that everybody starts somewhere, and you're gonna have to just take your ass beatings, lick your wounds, and keep grinding and keep getting better. Whereas you can jump into any other game. You know, you have like team-based shooters, you have team-based MOBAs, you have even like or just regular deathmatch shooters, stuff like that, where you can just get lucky, and you can feel good about just randomly getting headshots that honestly they were kind of just luck. That's all it really was. But people will feel good about that, and you know that'll make them continue coming back to the game. Whereas again, that doesn't really happen in fighting games. Fighting games requires a certain level of skill in order to succeed, and a certain level of dedication to the genre in order to get better and get those wins that do feel better, but in my opinion feel way better than anything else out there, because it is so heavily skill based, and you understand that, like, I did this. This isn't because the game was looking out for me. This isn't because I had teammates looking out for me. This is all me. This is all my work. And so when you're putting stuff in the game where it's like, yeah, we're trying to make the game simpler, to me, all that ever does is basically scream to me, we're going to limit how much fun you can have in the game. Eventually, you're going to get bored and move on, and the simpler we make it, the quicker you're going to get bored. And I've even had a few people, Cthulhu being the first one, and a couple other people have actually told me now too as well, that I probably won't like the game. Because they said, we tried to not have a fast game speed. That was an intentional design decision to slow the game down and reduce the pace. That's terrible to me. I love the faster game speeds. I mean, look at my favorite games that are out there right now. Unist is incredibly fast. It doesn't necessarily look like it if you don't know exactly what's going on. Like, I thought it, when I first was watching it, before I knew anything about the game, before I'd ever played the game, I honestly thought it looked slow. Not incredibly slow, not a bad slow, but it looked slower than the other fighting games that I had loved at the time, like Marvel vs. Capcom. And now that I've played it and I understand like how the game flows, what's going on, that game's fast, man. It really is. I love the faster game speeds, and so I'm looking at this, and I've seen it in motion, and characters are slow, normals are slow, and when you're even looking at that from a spectator's perspective, slow isn't good. Like, think of MMA, right? Like, MMA is probably the fastest growing sport in modern times. I mean, obviously the massive amount of growth that brought it to mainstream happened years ago, but still, it's still growing, it's still getting bigger, the fighters are getting better, etc., etc. But people go batshit insane for like fast, rapid pace slugfests between two people that are just on their feet and fighting each other using their boxing or their kickboxing or whatever, just a striking fight. That's what people want to see. At a lower level, there are people that are very satisfied with seeing the far slower pace of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or wrestling, that far more methodical, I shouldn't necessarily say technique-based, because that does kind of feel like a slight towards striking, which obviously you can get incredibly good at as well, but it's undeniable that the pace, the actual spectation of it is far flashier when two fighters are on their feet and trying to fight each other with their fists than it is when two fighters are on the ground, on the mat, trying to jockey for position and trying to do submissions or whatever. It's the same thing in fighting games. I've not seen a single fighting game that's been like super slow and methodical be a fighting game that people want to watch. Ever. I don't think that's going to change here. I would be absolutely surprised if that somehow did manage to change here. So, I think that, again, I mean, this is kind of a bunch of arguments that I made in the time of BlazBlue Cross Tag Battle as well, and I'm making them again here, where it's just, you're analyzing this from the wrong viewpoint. You're trying to target an audience that isn't supporting you to begin with. So, like, why don't you try to actually get the core fighting game group on your side first? And then you have that word of mouth. You have that identity that people can defend and talk about and try to support to get other people involved in your game. But they're not doing that. They're trying to just say, like, once again, hey, we're trying to make a simple fighting game available for everybody that can just pick it up and play it. And I feel like every fighting game fan out there just sees those words at this point and they're like, well, here's this bullshit again. And if they're not interested in Granblue Fantasy, then they're just going to, like, shift their attention away and go back to the fighting game they're enjoying right now that doesn't have those forced limitations on them. So, it's just, I hate seeing this time and time again because it is something that has plagued fighting games for a while now, and I think is going to continue plaguing fighting games until developers understand that it's just not going to work long term. And you should be concerned about the long-term success of your game. Because otherwise, the next version of your game that you come out with a year from now, a year and a half from now, whatever, less people are going to buy into. Because they're like, oh, well, I mean, when I bought that before, I barely even played it for a month, and I wasn't even having fun at the end of it anyway. Like, why would I buy into this next version of the game? It's just going to hurt you in the long run. So, I don't know, it sucks to keep seeing this. It sucks that this is going to continue being the case, apparently, for fighting games, but it is what it is. And this is one last thing that I want to talk about specifically, is apparently special moves have individual cooldowns. Like, where is that? Let me see. Basic. No, this is about combos. Was it here? Where was that question? Damn it. Where is the answer? Oh, no. I remember reading it, but I guess I scrolled past it. Oh, here we go. So, this game will provide... Fukuhara-san said in an interview that this game will provide action and strategic depth. What kind of features in the game would you say would demonstrate that the best? For Versus as a fighting game, there are the simple commands. You could activate your character skills with one button. As a trade-off for that, all the skills will have a cooldown time, so players cannot consecutively activate the same skills in a row. I feel that those two aspects bring out the kind of strategy and interactions between players that no other fighting game has demonstrated at this point. It's like a hybrid of one-button skill activation and also the old-fashioned command activation. The skills activated by the fighting game commands have shorter cooldowns. So what I'm actually not sure about this is if they're saying you can access all special moves through like the single button activation. So you press like forward plus that button and you get a certain special move, then down plus that button is another one, and back plus that button is another one, that kind of thing. Or if there are, every character just has like a couple one button activation moves and then a couple completely separate fighting game style, like, you know, quarter circles or whatever. I don't know what that, they didn't delve into that, so I don't know if that's the case, or if, like I said, every single special move can be activated through the one button press, but to do that, the skills will have a longer cooldown. But, like, the thing that's kind of weird to me is they say, like, no other fighting game has done something like this. That's essentially what charge mechanics are. That's literally what charge mechanics are. You put skills on a forced cooldown where somebody has to sit back and charge them for a little bit, and then you can make the skills, you can make the special moves stronger by nature because there's a limitation on how often you can perform them. That's literally the entire purpose of charge moves. So it kind of strikes me as odd that this guy would be like, nobody's ever done this before. Like, yeah, they have. They implemented a completely different way to activate your special moves to do exactly what you're talking about. So that's kind of strange to me. But the other thing that's strange to me is just the idea, like, how much that'll affect the pace and your options. And I don't think it makes it more strategic. I think it makes it more abusable, where essentially you'll have characters who have these really strong tools at their disposal. Like, think about Tager. That's the best way I can think about it. Think about Tager and the difference between having Spark Bolt all the time, just available whenever, versus how he actually is, where you have to charge it up. You have a meter that charges up over time. There are various things that can affect that. But, like, the difference in character quality between when Tager has Spark Bolt versus when he doesn't is ridiculous. You have to be scared and neutral against a Tager that has Spark Bolt. You don't have to give two shits about a Tager that doesn't. And so, like, I don't know. I don't really like it because it really speaks toward... It depends on how it'll work out and how important these special moves are toward a character's effectiveness. But it really feels like it's kind of like an all or nothing thing, where it's like, this character needs this move in order to actually be a character. But if it's on cooldown, they're just going to get rocked, and you're going to have a bad time. And so you're going to hate playing that character because there are certain times where your character just sucks. Think of Bullet. The difference between having heat up level 2 and having no heat at all. That kind of thing, right? Whereas, like, when you have no heat, her dash speed, her abilities for combos, all that kind of stuff is just destroyed and annihilated, and she's one of the worst. She is the worst character in the game. Whereas once she has heat level 2, she's actually has a semblance of being a real character, and she's somewhat decent. And so that scares me, just seeing that. Like, this is another interview where it legitimately concerns me about whether or not the game's actually going to be good. The other thing I actually talked about on stream as well, they did not hit on was it Granblue Fantasy or was it a different one? I'm pretty sure. Let's see. Granblue Fantasy Versus demo. I'm correct on this, right? Aren't I beta impressions? What was the one? Shit. See, this is all talking about the closed beta. There was a fighting game that's coming out that was gonna it has a demo, but if you live in America, you don't get the demo unless you pre-order the game. Everywhere else, like all the other major regions, they just get the demo. You can just download it for free. But if you live in America, you have to pre-order the game first, and then you'll get access to the demo. I feel like that was Granblue Fantasy, but now I can't find it. So why did you just go to images? Demo switch. Let me try that. No, it's all about the beta test. Okay, never mind. I don't know. I thought it was Granblue Fantasy, but apparently, given that I can't see anything about it, maybe it's not. Maybe it's something else. Okay, anyway, let's move on. I've talked enough. How long did I talk about that? I'm already almost at 30 minutes. God damn. Okay, I'm just going to be done. I talked about Granblue Fantasy way longer than I wanted to. So I'm going to end with a quick question. For those of you that listen to me that play Epic 7, do you guys hate the arena? Because I hate the arena. That's all I really have. I just want to ask. I don't want to give any details. I don't want to delve into it as a long topic. I don't care about discussing rank or anything. All that I care about is asking whether or not you enjoy the arena and the meta in the arena, and that's it. Because I hate it. I fucking hate it. I could go on about it for like an hour about how much I hate it, why I hate it, but that's unnecessary. I just want to know if you guys hate it as much as I do. And with that, I am going to leave. Thank you for listening. Appreciate it. Have a good day.